My mother told me to pack my things and leave their house in the middle of our holiday dinner. I couldn't believe it. I thought she was joking. There was no warning, no raised voice, no argument that built up to it. Just a calm, clipped instruction delivered between the passing of mashed potatoes and the polite clink of silverware against china. One moment I was reaching for my glass of water, the next she was looking straight through me and telling me it was time I stopped depending on the family and went home. The table went still. My parents' dining room in suburban Connecticut had always been designed to look warm in winter. Soft yellow lights, pine garlands draped carefully along the staircase railing, candles placed just so. From the outside, it looked like the kind of home people slowed down to admire in December. Inside, though, I felt the familiar chill settle into my chest. No one said my name. No one asked what she meant. My father kept his eyes lowered, pushing food around his plate like he could rearrange it into something safer. My older brother, Daniel, stared at his phone even though the screen was dark. My younger brother, Mark, lifted his wine glass with a faint smile, the kind that suggested this was entertainment, not conflict. I realized then that no one was surprised. I didn't respond right away. I let the words sit between us, heavy and unreal. Stop depending on the family. As if I hadn't been quietly paying for the things that kept this family functioning for years. As if my presence here had ever been framed as anything other than an obligation. For a moment, I stayed seated, letting the hum of the overhead light wash over me. I thought about how, when I was younger, I believed these dinners meant belonging. That if I showed up enough, contributed enough, proved myself enough, I'd earn a place at the table that wasn't conditional. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 43 years old. At work, I manage teams, budgets, long-term strategy. People come to me when things are on fire because they trust me to stay calm. At home, I am the daughter who is too independent, the sister who is too much, the one who somehow became both essential and expendable. My mother, Linda, has always controlled the emotional temperature of the room. When she's pleased, everyone relaxes. When she's cold, the air tightens. That night, she was glacial. She commented on the turkey, on the gravy, on how the neighbors had decorated their porch. She didn't look at me again. Growing up, she used to say that strong women hold families together. I didn't realize until much later that she meant one woman, and that woman was me. My brothers were never taught how to carry weight. They were taught how to pass it along. Daniel had passed it to me when his business venture collapsed and legal fees appeared overnight. Mark had passed it to me when his son's private school tuition came due and he fell short. My parents passed it to me when their expenses quietly outpaced their retirement income. I paid without announcing it. I covered gaps. I smoothed things over. I told myself this was love. Now, sitting at that table, I understood how love had been redefined in that house. Love was usefulness. Love was silence. Love was not asking for acknowledgement. Conversation restarted in awkward spurts, like a stalled engine catching again. I listened without speaking. Silence has a way of revealing what noise hides. Linda laughed at something Mark said. Daniel nodded along. My father breathed shallowly, as if afraid that any sudden movement might trigger something worse. At one point, Daniel finally spoke. "Mom's just saying you've been distant, Ev," he muttered, still not looking up. "Maybe this is for the best." Distant. A word people use when they've forgotten how often you showed up. Mark leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "If you're struggling, you could have just said so," he added. No shame in needing help. The irony was almost impressive. Before I could respond, my mother spoke again, her voice low and deliberate. "We can't keep pretending everything's fine," she said. "You rely too much on this family. It's time you learn to stand on your own." That was the moment things shifted. Not snapped. Snapping is loud and chaotic. This was quiet, precise, like something clicking into place. Her words didn't hurt the way insults do. They clarified. They rearranged the story I'd been telling myself for decades. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, not to cry, but to breathe. The mirror reflected a woman who looked steady, composed. Someone who finally understood the rules of the game she'd been playing without knowing it. When I returned, no one noticed. My chair made a soft sound against the floor, but no one looked up. That, more than anything, told me what I needed to know. I picked up my coat. Linda glanced at me, irritation flickering across her face like I'd interrupted her evening. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Home," I said. For a brief second, something like uncertainty crossed her features. Then it was gone. No one followed me. No one stopped me. The front door closed behind me with a finality that felt earned. The cold air outside was sharp, bracing. I walked to my car without looking back. Not because I was proud, but because I didn't trust myself to give them even a final look they hadn't earned. By the time I reached my apartment in the city, the numbness had faded, replaced by something cleaner. Resolve. I didn't sit down. I didn't pour a drink. I went straight to my bedroom and pulled out a suitcase. Not to run away, but to mark an ending. Folding clothes felt ceremonial. Each zipper, each neatly stacked item, was a line being drawn. Then I opened my laptop. I brought up accounts I hadn't looked at directly in years. Utilities for my parents' house. Insurance premiums. A storage unit I'd been covering, temporarily, for nearly a decade. Contributions labeled as favors that had quietly become expectations. Seeing it all in one place was sobering. The totals told a story I'd never let myself read. I hovered over the autopay settings and canceled them, one by one. Not out of anger. Out of alignment. They had told me to stop relying on the family. I was simply doing exactly that, in the most literal sense. Next came the lake property. A modest vacation house upstate that I had funded almost entirely, though my name had rarely been mentioned when plans were made. I paid the maintenance, the utilities, the internet. I wasn't always invited, but the bills always found me. Cancel. 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 Each confirmation email felt like a breath released. Finally, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Legal documents. At the time, my attorney had insisted on certain protections when I helped my parents with the property transfer. A safeguard, he'd called it. I'd agreed, barely thinking about it. Now, reading it again, it felt like foresight. I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of my apartment, city lights glowing faintly through the window. What I was doing wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was preparation. Because when they realized what my absence actually meant, everything would change. And I would be ready. 3 days passed before my absence became an emergency. Not a single message came asking if I was all right. No one checked in to see where I'd gone or whether I'd made it home safely. The silence wasn't accidental. It was expectation. They assumed I would cool down, reconsider, and quietly resume my place as the invisible support beam holding everything up. The first call came on the 4th morning. It was my younger brother, Mark. I watched his name flash across my phone while I stood in my kitchen, sunlight cutting across the counter in clean, deliberate lines. I didn't rush to answer. I let it ring long enough to establish that I was no longer on standby. "What did you do?" he demanded the moment I picked up, skipping any greeting. His voice was sharp, irritated, already convinced I was in the wrong. "I stopped paying for things I don't use," I said evenly. There was a pause, heavy with disbelief. "You can't just decide that." "I didn't decide suddenly," I replied. "I listened." He launched into complaints. The lake house was cold. The internet was down. Mom was upset. Plans were disrupted. Inconveniences stacked up like evidence of my selfishness. Not once did he ask why I'd left. Not once did he acknowledge what had been said to me. "You're punishing everyone," he snapped. "No," I said. "I'm stepping back." "That's the same thing," he insisted. "It isn't," I replied and ended the call. Later that day, my father left a voicemail. His voice was quiet, careful, layered with concern that sounded practiced rather than sincere. He suggested we talk things through like adults. He said families don't walk away from each other. He didn't mention my mother's words. He didn't apologize. 2 more days passed. Then a thick envelope appeared in my mailbox, its return address stamped with the name of a law firm downtown. I stood in the hallway staring at it longer than necessary, already understanding what it meant. Inside was a petition filed by my mother. She claimed emotional distress, confusion, a lack of understanding regarding prior agreements. She requested a court review of the lake property transfer and immediate restoration of ownership. They hadn't called me. They hadn't asked. They'd gone straight to trying to take back what they assumed I would never defend. That was the moment the last thread snapped cleanly, not with sound, but with certainty. I contacted my attorney that afternoon. He read through the documents, adjusted his glasses, and exhaled slowly. "They've triggered the reversion clause," he said. "So it's over?" I asked. "It already is," he replied. "Ownership reverted to you the moment they contested it. Automatically. Cleanly." I felt something settle inside me then. Not triumph. Not relief. Stability. We agreed to meet them. I chose a diner near our old neighborhood, the kind with worn booths and humming lights. Familiar enough to keep emotions grounded. Public enough to keep voices low. They arrived together. My mother walked in first, posture stiff, chin lifted. My father followed, eyes already tired. Daniel looked pale, hands shoved into his pockets. Mark was visibly angry, jaw tight, shoulders squared. They slid into the booth across from me like a panel assembled for judgment. "This has gone far enough," my mother said immediately. "You've made your point." "I didn't file anything," I said calmly. "You did." She bristled. "You blindsided us. Cutting everything off without warning." "I was told to stop relying on the family," I said. "So I did." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "You didn't have to take it this far." "I didn't," I replied. "You did when you involved lawyers." I placed a folder on the table. Inside were years of records. Utilities, tuition payments, insurance, maintenance. Every quiet contribution documented, totaled, undeniable. My father stared at the numbers, his face draining of color. "You paid all of this?" "Yes." "For years?" Daniel asked softly. "Yes." Mark scoffed, though his voice wavered. "We never asked you to." "No," I said. "You expected it." The diner felt suddenly too quiet. I slid another document forward. "This is the property agreement," I said. "The clause you ignored." My mother's eyes scanned the page. Her lips parted slightly, then pressed together. "You didn't lose the lake house because of me," I continued. "You lost it because you tried to take something that wasn't yours." For the first time, she looked afraid. Not angry. Not offended. Afraid. "We're your family," she said finally, her voice strained. "I treated you like one," I replied. "You didn't treat me like a person." I stood and smoothed my coat. From my wallet, I pulled a single dollar and placed it on the table between us. "That's what my contribution was worth to you," I said. "Everything else I already gave." No one spoke. I walked out without looking back. The bell over the diner door chimed softly behind me, the sound oddly gentle for something so final. In the days that followed, the quiet felt different. It wasn't the silence of being excluded. It was the silence of no longer being on call. My apartment felt brighter. The mornings felt calmer. I woke without bracing myself for someone else's emergency. My attorney confirmed everything in writing. The property was mine. Final. No appeal. No loopholes. He asked if I wanted to pursue damages. I declined. Justice doesn't need an audience. A week later, my father sent a short email. No guilt. No scripture. Just a line saying they were figuring things out. I hoped they were. That weekend, I walked along the river, winter air sharp against my face. I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won something, but because I'd put something down. I hadn't abandoned my family. I had stopped abandoning myself. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're clarity. And clarity, once claimed, is freedom. Moral lessons. This story teaches the importance of setting clear boundaries, even with family, and shows that love does not mean allowing others to take advantage of your generosity. It reminds us that quiet strength and calm decision-making can be far more powerful than anger or confrontation. Consistently enabling others may create resentment rather than gratitude, and sometimes stepping back is necessary for your own well-being. Evelyn's experience encourages self-respect, personal responsibility, and the courage to protect yourself legally, financially, and emotionally. Ultimately, it demonstrates that true freedom comes when you stop sacrificing your life for others' expectations and start honoring your own needs, without guilt.